Yeah, thank you for joining us. I'll introduce our special guest today, who is Professor David Southwood. I've got a very long biography here, and I am going to go through it because it is very interesting. So David Southwood is a senior research investigator in the physics department of Imperial College and chair of the London Institute for Space Policy and Law. David spent an academic career largely at Imperial, becoming head of physics in 1994. In 1997, he joined the European Space Agency, drawing up a plan leading to the present EU Copernicus, ESA, Earth Explorer, Earth observation programs. In 2001, he became ESA Science Director, overseeing ESA missions to orbit Moon, Mars, Venus, and land on Titan, as well as building and launching astronomy spacecraft like Herschel, Planck, Integral, Gaia, and the ESA contribution to JWST. He returned to Imperial in 2011 and served as president of the Royal Astronomical Society from 2012 to 2014 and chair of the UK Space Agency Steering Board 2016 to 2019. He received a CBE in the 2019 for services to space science and industry in UK and Europe. So over to you, David.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. Everybody hearing me satisfactorily? Yes, certainly. Okay. So it's great to see some familiar faces. And it's great to talk on the 50th anniversary of ESA. And a contribution, I'm here largely because of Jerry Stone and secondarily because of Alistair. And the first part of the talk, a very short part, I trust, is due to Alistair. Having heard this talk once, he said there wasn't enough about the history of ESA. So you know who to blame. This is a picture of the beginning of space science for the UK. That's a Thor Delta rocket. That's at what was called Cape Kennedy before it was called Cape Kennedy, Cape Canaveral. And there are four really quite famous space scientists, UK space scientists. The shortest one, I don't know if there's, yes, the shortest one here is Harry Massey, Sir Harry Massey. He was behind everything in the 50s and the 60s. In fact, quite a remarkable man, and certainly the father of UK space science. And in fact, he came from Australia, born in 1908. This is Jim Sayers from the University of Birmingham. Over here, we have Robert Boyd, who gave us the Mullard Space Science Lab somewhere down in the Surrey Alps outside Guildford. And for me, the chap with the light-coloured trousers, Harry Elliott, he was my mentor in many ways. He was the head of the research group I joined at Imperial in the 1960s. Okay, that's April 1962. In fact, by the time of the launch of Ariel 1, which was a UK spacecraft launched by an American rocket, Europe was already putting into place means to both build spacecraft in Europe and to launch them from Europe. There were two organizations. Their English names were ESRO, the Space Research Organization, and ELDO, the European Launcher Development Organization. By the 70s, that arrangement was unsatisfactory. ELDO is now sometimes taught in management school as an example of dysfunctional management. The reason being that there was too much secret work in building bits of space, bits of rockets, and there was no overall management oversight possible. And that's really that is really historically correct. But by the 1970s, anyhow, they didn't want just launchers and space science organization. European countries wanted more of a full service space organization. Science, meteorology, telecoms, astronauts, launchers. And that was not going to be provided by ESRO. And so a new organization was needed, and indeed a new launcher was needed. So in June 1975, this is the first issue of anything by the European Space Agency, the European Space Agency Bulletin, number 1, Juin 1975, 1975, for those of you who need it in French. And of course, ESA was called ARS for a long time by the French. They finally got used to calling it ESA. Okay, so unfortunately, a full service space organization costs money. And what ESA was being asked to do was more than what NASA was asked to do. NASA is had been taken out of telecommunications deliberately, and all applications work. They do science and exploration. That's their limit. The full service organization was going to cost money, and science took a hit. In fact, the initial ESA science budget available for science was around 60% of the old ESRO budget. This really meant you couldn't do much more than to cooperate with the Americans, put bits of kit on American spacecraft. Of course, that worked out very well with the Hubble Space Telescope. It wasn't entirely bad, but the Americans, wonderful people though they are, sometimes have difficulty in maintaining their side of partnerships. And that led quite soon to a realization that the ESA science budget was inadequate. How was that resolved? Well, it took a new science director, somebody called Roger Maurice Bonnet, of the obviously French persuasion and background, and it took a decade of lobbying to get the budget back up to the proportion it should expect if it was going to match the ESRO budget. That introduced me to politics. There is Roger. He always looks so happy. And there he is. He's got a Soyuz spacecraft behind him. And my deduction from looking at the logo on his shirt is that that's the launch of the cluster spacecraft at Baikonur. It took this new director a decade of lobbying with a lot of help, and I was one of the people following the leader in getting that budget up. It certainly didn't make me popular in this country, which is a bit of a tightwad nation sometimes. I don't know if anyone noticed that. But once you've got the budget up, you can start building to a plan. And there was the plan. Roger did it by designing a plan, long-term plan, and getting the science community completely committed to it. And it takes you a while to get the real harvest to start coming. Okay, it takes about 10 years because that's the length of time space missions take to come from initial conception through gestation to flying. By the time that at the end of the century, 2000, we'd seen ISO, SOHO, cluster, and Newton flying, and these were the first beginnings of the harvest. Okay, but then I really felt proud of being part of this, and I was chairman of the Science Program Committee to support Roger, the director. He really was the great man who changed the face of European space science. In 1997, I joined the European Space Agency. I worked with Roger, and our task was to set up an Earth observation program based on the principles established in the science program. And of course, we designed the Earth Explorer program, which still exists, and the Copernicus long-term EU ESA global monitoring program, which still exists. This program, those two programs taken together, are much bigger than the ESA science program today. They're about 3 times larger when you add them together. In 2000, I was nominated to succeed Roger Bonnet. And at this point, I can take off and you can see. Well, you can't on this, doesn't look like you can see it on there. But this is my monogrammed Director of Science shirt. It's about the only thing you get on top of the salary. And it's got my name on it, just in case I forget. Anyhow, I dragged it out for you today. Okay. In 2001, we had operating in Europe a mission going over the poles of the sun called Ulysses. It was the first explorer out of the ecliptic. It had started as a partnership with the US, and they had dropped out. Still, Americans took part, but much reduced. Only 1 spacecraft, there were due to be 2. There was also a 15% contribution to the flagship of space astronomy, the Hubble Space Telescope. And but by 2001, we'd launched 2 big programs, which were the product of Bonnet's program that he promised 15 years before. SOHO and Cluster were 5 spacecraft, 1 looking at the sun and 4 orbiting the Earth, doing what's called solar terrestrial physics. And the other one, Newton, or XMM, X-ray multi-mirror, was a brilliant spacecraft still operating that does X-ray spectroscopy, which sounds very dull, but actually it's doing the kind of chemistry of extreme objects, telling you what things are made of. That had been launched in 1999, so it was just brand new at the time.